Hey everyone, my name is Ash. I'm your host. Welcome to the Triple AP YouTube channel. Tonight, I wanted to do a rough draft meditation more so on the specifics of this economy, this thing that I keep talking about. And I wanted to do so by citing a very specific example that I had stumbled upon while doing some writing. So, in the course of human events, what we find is that there seem to be two camps that are necessarily at odds with each other. That would be the accelerationists and the decelerationist. These people who lead the front towards opening the ports, towards globalizing, that's the word that I would use. And this other camp, the decelerationist. So when this force moves out, the decelerationist move it back in. We see this in the collapse of Rome. We see this in where populations that were centered in the city where this energy was directed, suddenly when Rome fell, the city, the population moved outwards. The city was vacant. And so everyone retreated to the countryside, and the economy seemed to slow. And this is a reoccurring pattern throughout all of history. It seems that when we have this accelerationist camp, there's always a decelerationist period that follows. So, of course, it's no wonder that suddenly where we find ourselves is in a period in which unprecedented acceleration, this is how it works. Unprecedented acceleration is always followed by unprecedented deceleration. So for all of the people who were very nervous about the progress that we have made over the past 200 years, this capitalist society that we've created, this civilization that seems to have this shadow that follows it, what we find is that in exercising almost a leap of faith, we can reconcile this period of progress with a very immediate, very imminent cultural deceleration. Of course, we see this in online discourse. We see that there's a whole camp of esotericists called accelerationists, and their goal is to push and push and push until there's a breaking point. Well, what I posit is this very same breaking point is the decelerationist camp. These people who are all lifted by this wind to find themselves looking up at the progress that we've made and having this intuitive gut feeling that there's just something off about it. Why is that? How could that be? When it was literally just 2 generations ago, our grandparents, maybe our great-grandparents, were the people who were up in the steel beams creating these skyscrapers, creating these very large systems that united the globe, spearheading whole countries, whole continents into this period of unprecedented growth. And for their very immediate descendants, we said, 2 generations, maybe 3, maybe 4. What we find is that suddenly there's this evocative gut feeling as to this is wrong, this is strange, this is weird. I don't like being cooped up in my room on my phone. How could that be? How could that be? Is this what our grandparents would have wanted? And that's the question to ask them. If you have them, go ask them. Is this what you wanted? Did you know that this would be a consequence of what you built? A lot of the time what you get is this: I didn't know that would be the case. Well, I thought we would just have, I was just doing what I was told. This is unconscious. Progress is unconscious. There is not a purposeful exercise in conscious matter when it comes to the acceleration or the deceleration. This is an unconscious, intuitive, instinctive mode of operation that we're talking about. So if the history of mankind, we can apply that logic everywhere. All of human history, all of Earth's history is unconscious, instinctive, intuitive. If that's the case, then how is it that we can even pride ourselves on progress in the first place if we can't even take credit for it? It's a means of averages. That if the whole nation makes an accomplishment, then the many individuals within that nation get to claim that accomplishment as their own. But then, of course, you can't ask the nation what it thinks unless you ask all of the people. And as we've just clarified, if you ask one person, they're going to say, "Oh, well, I don't know. Well, I was doing what I was told. It is my civic duty as an American citizen, as a first world citizen, as a member of the species we call human." And the same applies with this decelerationist camp. This is the camp that we occupy. Think of it this way. Like I was saying, this whole cultural ghost that is being evoked, that is coming forth, that is springing forth, is a very unifying force insofar as, because we are within these confines that we've built for ourselves, that were built for us, these cages, these rooms, these houses, these neighborhoods, societal networks, whole states, whole counties, communities. What we find is that this applies specifically to ourselves as individuals, but also to these same networks. That if we have this intuition and we're building this world unconsciously, who's to say that the same unconscious force, these same things that we would call as unconscious, don't also have a role to play in it? That economies, that states, that nations, that cultures, these ghosts that I keep talking about, are real things. They are as conscious to it as we are. If we're both unconscious, then it's all conscious, right? Because there is no that whole sentiment. It's a very strange, very almost, you get pushed off of a cliff. You get pushed off of a cliff of this certainty that you had that, the human species had conquered the world. When in reality, there was a world that was cultivating us in the same way that we were cultivating it. That if all of the humans are unconsciously moving towards this endless march of progress, then is it not the same to say that all of the unconscious things, as unconscious as we are not also marching towards an end goal? Well, what is the end goal? What could the end goal possibly be? Here's it. I posit this. For each culture in which the camp is leaning towards acceleration, they find an end goal. They create one for themselves. They say, oh, well, take the small shop owner, right? As an accelerationist, as one who is aiming to accelerate, his goal, her goal, is to create this business, to build it, to put it together, these metaphysical things like supply and demand, and to accelerate towards a point of self-sufficiency, economically speaking, right? That the the revenue is more than the outgoing cost, the overhead. If that's the case, and the accelerationists have had this unified swing for so long, once they reach these end goals one by one by one by one by one, and they run out of vision, they run out of these like a snowball falling, rolling, growing bigger and bigger and bigger. Once that runs out, because that ball must reach the end of the cliff, right? And when it does, where does it go but down? The accelerationists cannot stand to think that there's an end when they have created an end. They're working towards an end, a very conscious end. And what we've said is that this consciousness is an illusion. That as soon as they've reached their climax, there's another subset of groups, these decelerationist, and keep in mind, groups plural. Because what happens, again, if we're talking, follow me here, this metaphor that the world is globalizing, that these fractal states, these myriad beings are becoming one cohesive, energetic group, that requires a lot of resources. That has been the point of these accelerationists, is to globalize. It always has been. Whether that's the aristocracy of contemporary, say, antiquity, trying to get, maybe into China, or to, say, modern day. We'll find that China itself now, as a unified force, wants to take hold of Africa and give it these shark loans in which it can reach and dominate and grow and grow and grow and unify its own influence over them. Well, what's the point? They obviously have a vision. There's a goal for these tasks that they're working on. So each group has within them their own accelerationists. Each culture, each group, each goal. So in this sense, this upswing, that's how we determine the definition of the accelerationists, because they like to see the lines go up, right? They see these tasks as accomplished, and it's like running quicker and quicker towards this cliff. As we've said already, that once they fall off, there's already, this is what we're positing, there's already a cultural preparation within the womb of this acceleration for it to be handed off to these decelerationist. These people who, the energy, these resources by means of economy, we've established this, by means of economy have reaped these resources, they've reaped what they've sown, and now they have it. It's handed off to the decelerationist. And the decelerationist congregate back into the countryside. They back away from the urban areas. They're handed off back into these little spaces. And then they can grow and cultivate within there. Now, here's the part about the society, about this contemporary era that we find ourselves in now, is that if we say ourselves, this is our own title that we've bestowed upon ourselves, is that we have unprecedented progress. We have unprecedented globalization. If that's the case, then this hotbed of deceleration that's been brewing and steaming and growing within the belly, when they're ready to inherit, they will drive it to the ground. This is the fate of our epoch. This is the fate of our era. We posit this, that in order for the survival, that's what this is all about, the intuition must be handed to the decelerationist, and they must guide it back down into the fractal states. And of course, in another generation, as this epoch moves forward, the next generation, then the accelerists will make their upswing as they do. And we will find again unprecedented progress. That's how this works. The difference is that the progress that can be made after a period of deceleration looks a lot different. For instance, you can take this even with the accelerationist camp itself. Is what you find is if you ask, say, people in the 1960s, we've all seen this, that they ask them what life is going to look like in only 40 years, in the year 2000, they say, oh, well, we'll be, having vacations on the moon. We won't have to worry about, hunger, food, or anything like that. We'll have unprecedented progress. That's what they always say, and that's their cop-out, right? But we don't buy it, of course. We don't buy that anymore. We've had enough. We've had this intuitive feeling for our entire lives that something is very deeply wrong. And if we grant our intuition even the slightest amount of justification to exist, it's going to take it and run. That's where we're at. That is where we are at. So no longer do we have to think globally. Do we have to travel globally? The decelerationist who find themselves affirming this cultural progress that's happening, will find themselves enmeshed in their immediacy. This is a word that I keep running into too, as I'm doing these studies and these meditations, is immediacy. That it's so easy. There was a wind. There was a justification. There was a wind that blew the accelerationists upwards. That was their idealism for this globalized progress, that they could reap more than they had sown through this idealism. This global idealism, I should say. So the difference is this. Well, that wind has run out. The globalized dream is over. We cannot feed our families anymore. That's what this is about. Because back then they could, and they did. That's why they continued to grow and grow and grow and grow. It's like a parabola. It never reaches the top. It slows down. It almost reaches the top. It gets ever and ever closer, but it never quite does. so then they must come back down. That's for us, the young people. We'll get old, we'll have our own generations that succeed us, and we'll hand it off to them, this project, this accelerationist project. And to do so will appear only to the accelerationists as costing an immense value. This thing that they had grown so fond of, this exploitation almost. We see it as exploitation. Of course, now it is so bastardized, right, that we get all of the, the last arc of the accelerationists are the young people, my generation, yours, Gen Z, more or less, who are getting into drop shipping. They do the whole, you know what I'm talking about. These people who buy from China very, very cheap and sell to American families very, very high. These are not our friends. These are not our allies. These are not on the side of capitalism, who aims to create, French Enlightenment, very laissez-faire life, liberty, and property. These are not capitalists, nor are they Marxists. They're exploiters. And they're accelerationists. This defies the conventional terms of left and right in this way. Do you see what I mean? That if we define the epoch in terms of life, liberty, and property, life, liberty, maybe the pursuit of happiness, they're not achieving this. And for class consciousness, they're certainly not achieving that, if you take the Marxist perspective. Because both of them are thinking globally. They worked towards opening the ports to China. We're reaping what we've sown. That's it. We have not gotten anything that we hadn't willingly pursued. So our choice is this. Hope is not lost. Hope is only lost if you're attached, if you have your nails dug into this phase of civilization, of this accelerationist perspective. In that case, if your hope is vested with that, then I do say your hope is lost. And you should give up, because your wind is gone. However, to those with their fingers on the pulse, I say to you, there's nothing but hope. There's nothing but faith. That we can just sit and abide and work very steadily and work very hard on our immediacy. We'll cover that. Immediacy being a lot different than this globalization that we've talked about. Immediacy is the connection not only in body. We have no choice but to be bodily immediate, right? We have to stand on the physical ground that we're standing on. That ground is what is very immediate to us. But with mind and soul, I would argue for soul, but especially mind, is the ideologue, right? The mind is off in China, pursuing Japan, pursuing Southeast Asia, all of these places. The world is my point. So, the immediacy of mind, body, and spirit, bringing the spirit, the soul, back also into immediate by uniting the two, body and mind, what we find is a culture that is much, much different. And by culture, I mean a collection of people all exercising and interacting with their immediate environment. Now, if you've seen the other episodes, you'll know I'm also talking about an economy. And the fact that I'm talking about people means I'm talking about a political body. And you can fill in the third one if you know, okay, say it with me. This is religious too. We're talking about the soul. We're talking about these metaphysical things that the other people who are, relinquishing their mindful immediacy refuse to call metaphysical. They want their empiricism. They want something that they can prove. Well, I ask you this, follow your intuition. This is an exercise that I've seen. This comes from Michael Segru, Dr. Michael Segru, PhD, Princeton University. He says that in the exercise of idealism, there is the notion of intuition. This comes from philosophy. The contemporary philosophical schools of thought who give us the culture that we have today. That's undeniable. And we can posit it like this, that, for instance, if I say I have a headache, it's really that simple. If I have a headache, you know what I'm talking about. I don't need to prove it to you. We already deny the necessity for empiricism. If we needed empiricism that much, every time someone said something like that, our intuition would be void, be deaf, and we would require evidence for a headache. Do you see what I mean? We have within us an intuition. We have within us an unconscious going forth. We are progressing. We are progressing into the regression. The people who inherit will find themselves in that situation. All people will find themselves in this situation. This is our immediacy. This is how important this is. This is why I talk about gardening. Body, mind, soul, imbued, united in their immediacy. And of course, there's no denying, the keen amongst you already know that if we have this period of deceleration, it will be followed by an acceleration again someday. And that's very true. And we can ponder that all we want, but that's not immediate. Find your immediacy. Congregate with your immediacy, your immediate peers, your friends, your family. Things that you like, things that you love that's around you, okay? That comes from the intuition as well. Art that you enjoy. Don't listen to music that you don't like. Don't eat food that you don't like because you feel like there's some greater goal to do so. That's what accelerationists do. We're not there anymore. This is the dynamic of history. This is the dynamic of not only history, but also modern people today. So as we find ourselves 22 minutes into a rambling about the politics and economy and religion of modern day, do we find ourselves so immediate? Of course. We could argue for and against, but I think it's for. This whole project comes out of passion. For me, honestly, truth be told, it is very uncomfortable for me to put the camera on and to talk with as much gumption, gusto as I do. And it is also uncomfortable for me to sit and read the long books that I do, and I honestly find resentment in it, of course, because I don't want to. There's a vein of compromise that comes with passion, I think. The passion that I have for this project, okay, bear with me, we're getting kind of into it here. The vein that comes with passion, this current, that's what I mean by vein, this current that we have to follow when we follow our passion, is like sowing. It sucks to till the soil, to rake up the leaves, and to carry the water. These are all things that I have to do for my garden. But the joy that I get from reaping, from getting what I pursue to do, is what justifies it. Absolutely, 100%. When I get to talk to fun people, because I put myself out like this, it makes it worth it. When I see projects come together and I see that immediacy that I was talking about take place, it reaffirms my own personal intuition for this project, but it also affirms my faith in the higher intuition, the more profound, the more subtle intuition. That is the type of intuition that is, it even exceeds global. It's almost cosmic, right? It's ineffable. It is, insofar as it is cosmic, right? It's out there, but it's also very cosmic inwardly as well. That as soon as we shift the mirror, right, we seem to open up and become this expansive void. So it is very full-bodied, this project. There are high highs and low lows. There's stagnancy, of course. You have to have stagnancy in order to get yourself motivated to get out of bed, because it sucks so bad that if you don't get up, then you don't survive. If you don't have your finger on the pulse of immediacy, then you do not survive. You do not survive. Of course not. In fact, if you want some evidence to that, hold your breath. I'm not going to do it with you, but you can hold your breath and see how far that gets you. Because that's what you can do if you want to deny the immediacy of the body. If you say, well, I don't need air, I don't need food. I have my progress. I have these skyscrapers. I have my, advanced medical technology. You would be surprised. Okay. The people who are watching think that that's ridiculous. Of course, and I do too, obviously. But truth be told, there are people who would say, these people who are so tied in their just superstitious attachment to progress that they, I'm thinking of a Redditor. You know what I mean? I'm thinking of some guy who really likes Reddit, and he's going to say like, oh, well, if my medical technology needed me to hold my breath until I died, I would do it because the greater good. Are you for real? Really? No, and you're not for real. It's performative, of course. Well, all of life is a performance, we know that, but it is, especially to me, it is very right. You're sacrificing your own morality, your own self-survival, your own self-worth for this little bit of updoots. Are you serious? You're really gonna? Okay. That a point in time comes when you've had this generation of seething Reddit guys, Redditors, okay? This brewing pot, and then these newcomers to it, this next generation who goes in there and says, what are we doing? What are we doing? That we find ourselves so, to these newcomers, it looks very lost. These very lost souls. These very global souls, they seem to be separated from their body in this strange, mystical, almost kind of like wind. But I've already said my bit about that there's really, it had to happen, but now it has to pass. So, let's get down to brass tacks. Let's talk about some goals, guys. Come on. Bring it home. One of the goals that I have for this project, something that I really want to do, is I want to tie two things together. Bear with me here. This is a lot at once, but you're doing good. We're doing good here, guys. Okay. What I really want to see happen is for each of us, we're doing a very global thing right now. We're very scattered, you and I, assuming that you might be halfway across the country. This is a very global exercise. But find your immediacy, okay? Because I want to combine these two things. I want to find these, of course, maybe by now you've read the manuscript if I have published it in the future and you're watching this video now. But in this manuscript that I'm writing, I detail this profound finding of the ghost that springs forth the meadows and the forests. And this very important, if you want to call it a ghost or a spirit or a phenomenon, in which possesses and guides these things, these creatures, these little seeds to sprout within the soil. That by acknowledging this, right, again, all of my Spotify episodes, I talk about, this ghost coming forth, how we can derive an aesthetic from it, right? Because we're not going to be using plastic containers in the Abbey, right? The Abbey being the inhabitants, this political economy, right? Because there are humans and resources, right? The interaction is called the abbey. And so within this abbey, it's going to look very different than a typical neighborhood. The people will be very close together. Remember, we talked about deceleration. You following me here? So, right, we'll find our resources very close to us. The gardens will be very close to the river, who are very close to the houses, who are very close to the, we'll say like an earth quarry, where we find the clay to make earthworks, like the houses, or like the jugs that hold the seeds or the food and the water and all that. It's a very stark difference to what we have today, where we have those same bubbles that exist. We can make zones out of them, in which we say, a section called a neighborhood, a section called our farming, our section called, the means of distribution, like grocery stores, stuff like that. So really what's happened is that we've had a lot of little ones that have grown and grown and grown into very big ones. We have a lot of housing in one space, a lot of distribution in one space, a lot of farming in one space. We have 200-acre corn farms. That's the state of where we're at. And for some people, they see that and they say, oh, well, that's the progress. That makes sense. Like, why wouldn't there be? These are the ghosts of the past. These are the ghosts of the past. But there's a ghost of the present who is bringing us to that ghost of the future. Okay, if we're getting into fall time, into winter time, into Christmas stories, I guess we'll roll with it. Okay, that when we find ourselves with these things that have grown and grown and grown, my point is they shrink back down, they fracture, they become fractal. That's the nature of life and our experience on Earth, of course, cosmically. So, I digress. The aesthetic that can be derived is just from that. We're not going to have plastic containers because that's going to be like, oh, well, we have earth ones. That's what we do. The same way that's what people use to justify. It's that intuition, that very unconscious mode. Okay. It's making sense. It's coming together. Okay. So that's one. That's one mode. This is the one that is receiving the energy, right? So what we've seen, what we've described thus far, is that energy and matter, right? That it requires energy to move resources. Think of the distribution systems like Walmart; they require a lot of energy physically, right, with power plants and gasoline. Same metaphysically too with the ghost. So what happens is that energy slows down, and it's like it stalls and it drops right down. So suddenly we have to be very immediate, that the people who are immediate are the ones who inherit. This is nothing new, okay? We've covered this, all right. So the good stuff. This garden will now receive that energy. This abbey will, because there will be humans in that garden. Guys, your yard wants to be a garden. You understand that, right? That when you look out the window and you see a farm that's been left vacant for 5 years and you see little trees coming up and you see a meadow with those tall flowers that rise above the horizon line, right? That land, that, piece of land is allocating resources. There is an economy that is rising within that land. The only difference is it's not human because it's not conscious, but if humans are also not conscious, then what do we say, okay? That is this. Humans have a part to play in it. We have a relationship with it. This is the point. This is the good stuff. Okay. So, the transitionary period that we're entering, right? This is the other half. We talked about the garden, the abbey, first. The second is the transition. As acceleration becomes deceleration, it's like those tiny little steps before you plummet as your energy. If you're like if you're in an airplane and you run out of fuel, right? Metaphor, but hear me out. You're going up, and then you stall, and then you go straight down, or you glide down, or you can glide down. And that's what we're doing. Okay? We're using our intuition to guide us. We are aligning that triad, mind, body, and spirit, and we are trusting that gut feeling. We are going with that flow, Because again, all we have to do is sit and wait. The yard will become a garden because we wait. That's the point. So, this transition, these little skips before that fall, right? If we're thinking about it that way, would be this sort of like an adapter to transfer this energy. How do we get people out of the cities back into the countryside? How does that transition happen? That's the other half, this other branch, right? So when I talk about like the party and I talk about the economy that comes with the party, it sounds very vague, but I'm really only talking about this adapter to allow this current to flow, right? That we, by getting this word out, now I am being like half-assed, like joking about, we'll be in the streets proselytizing and like spreading this good word, this and that. But really, there's a bit of sincerity that comes with it. Because really, you think about it this way. The example that I really like is the Druze culture. This culture who was available to the public. I believe it was the 1500s. I believe it was the 16th century. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that they basically, it was a religious movement at the time in which they said, okay, we have a revelation, we have this culture that's coming forth, everybody come on in, all aboard. But what happened is that they had a period then when they locked it and they said, okay, no more people, that their imams had gone into occultation, I believe. And so when that happened, they suddenly cut off, right? So in that sense, they're also like an adapter, like channeling this energy. You staying with me here? Okay, hear me out. That I'm saying that the same is true today. That the people who can plug in to become that adapter, to have like party offices in cities, like these headquarters, right? To bring people in, to give them a fun aesthetic to role play in, and to give them this opportunity to explain these points. To say, here's the truth, guys. We're decelerating. Okay, it's all coming back in. We're all crashing you. We're scattered out in the streets. Think about it literally. Think about it literally, please. This is your immediate function. This is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about high-minded, distant things that we have to hope happens, and we have to pray really hard to make happen. I'm talking about an entropy. I'm talking about a physical reality that is inevitable. The people who hop on now will have everything to gain in the future. That's the point I want to make here, guys. And the same is true in these party headquarters that we have, that I want to have. So, okay. Getting to this point of success, getting to this point, because we have our own conception of what this goal is, right? This entropic force, just as the accelerationists had before, because all they had to do was sit around and wait too. So it's not so much that game that we have to play, right? We don't really have to try very hard. We don't have to think a lot. We don't have to justify a lot. But I think by connecting those two, this is my mission. This is what I really want to do so bad. I want to get these people out together so that we can have fun. Let's go to an art museum. Let's dress up in fun costumes. Let's dress up like we're, 20th century aristocracy. These political figures, handing out pamphlets and saying, everybody come together for this good cause. But at the end of the day, there's this really subtle, very profound kind of electric charge that comes with it. This power that comes with it. This inheriting force that comes with it. It's enough to give you chills, bro. Okay, all right. Those two. Can't have one without the other, I don't think. Prove me wrong, okay? Prove me wrong. As everything goes, I'll make claims that I, believe very passionately for, but I will concede if proven wrong. If we can suddenly, just switch like that, that would be great. But I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening at all. I think that if we can gradually transition, it'll seem like years. It might even be a couple of generations to even get past that first bump, right? But the truth is, that fall is happening. It's inevitable. What goes up must come down. Because then if you switch the graph, right, like to these people who inherit, you're going up if you're going down now. this is about this sort of like reflective duality, if you want to get like real cerebral about it. We don't have to do that. I don't really want to do that. To where actually, well, I will say this. Okay. we in the present have resentment towards our maybe ancestors, right? Because they chose to compromise to create this civilization. Because if you go back in time, I mean, be for real. If you go back 3 generations and ask your ancestor what they think about it, like, oh, it's great that we made it to China and we had this diplomatic influence and this and that. That's what they're going to say. Like, let's be for real, okay? Let's not pretend like they're going to say anything other than that. By and large, okay, they might be like, if you're very, very lucky, you might have an ancestor who was a profound pioneer of this deceleration, which is true. And that very well could be the case. But the truth is this, they probably won't. And so because of that, what I think is hilarious is the idea that if we could fast forward 5 generations into the future, that those inheritors of that position, that cultural condition, that physical condition, economic condition, would say the same about us, that we didn't do enough. We got them there. We decelerated. We started that, but they'll only see it as a transitionary period, because we happen to have the curse of being pioneers. It's really too bad. But I think it's funny. And I really hope that happens. I hope that happens, where I hope that in 5 generations, my descendants can say, he was a traitor. He was a counter-revolutionary. He didn't do nearly enough to decelerate from that, like... I hope so. I really hope so. And I'll be smiling, bro. I'll be like, well, I did what I could. I always do. Well, folks, it's been great. It's been fun. I'm glad that you've hung out as long as you have. If you've made it to this point, 43 minutes, that's not bad. If you have questions, if you have ideas or comments, thoughts or conjecture, if you want to, hate, go ahead. That would be fun. We can talk. Leave lots of questions. I want to talk more about broad topics. I want to talk, give a better idea, because right now I'm only working off my own, flame. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.